Hi, Sifu Slim here, and I'm here bright and early. We're going to go catch Dr. Steve Politis, physical therapist with lots of background in sports and athletic, playing, treating, therapy, coaching. We're going to go see what he has to say about some of the work I'm looking into with aging athletes and junior athletes. Let's go meet him. So here's Dr. Steve's office, Kenichi Health and Movement Center. Dr. Steve Politis, all kinds of certifications and degrees, training, sports, movie-nat, yoga, and physical therapy. Lots of treatment, lots of wellness promotion. Let's go see what he has to say about some of my research. (1908) building?
I think 1914.
1914 historic building with high ceilings. Really cool place to provide wellness for the practitioners here and for the patients. This is Dr. Steve. I met him on the beach several years ago, and he's a physical therapist, athlete, who's been at wellness for more than 20 years. So a wonderful person to learn from, experiential learning, studying, researching himself. So we'll see what he has to say about some of the work that I'm doing. The Aging Athlete Project. So have you ever heard that term, Dr. Steve, before I mentioned it to you?
I have, just in the fitness and rehab and kind of all of that industry. There's often a lot of talk as all the baby boomers and the density of the population is moving in the aging direction. How to keep them healthy, how to keep them going. So that term I've heard before. Everybody has a little different approach to it.
So when these former athletes come to see you, whether they're 22 and retired from the military or 50-year-old general contractors are moving away from doing that high-end physical activity, what are some of the things that are going on in their mind, body, spirit when they come in to see you?
Well, most often there's old injuries and things that tend to creep up and come back and haunt them a little bit. And one of the ways that manifests very often is a loss of mobility in some part of the body, a knee, a hip, a shoulder, a spine, something like that. The ankles are often a culprit. But with a loss of mobility in one area, that tends to just kind of radiate through the rest of the body because of the kinetic chain and how everything is interconnected. The loss of motion in one area will restrict the adjacent area's ability to move, and then it just whittles down over time the scope of how a person can move, use their body, and ultimately starts to whittle away at the activities that they're doing. Because once they start to not be able to do stuff, that gets much more frustrating. And so kind of whole body, mind, spirit, it becomes annoying and frustrating, and people have this body image of how they were able to function 10, 20 years ago, whatever age they are, and so then there's this disconnect, and that just leads to being kind of depressed and the woe is me, and I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not this or that, I'm not like I was when I was 20. And so it kind of affects the whole body, mind, spirit as a...
And when you can't move, is a natural default setting to reach for something that's in a bottle and say, hey, maybe this will make me feel better, like an anti-inflammatory or a painkiller or an antidepressant?
Yeah, and that's my bit of a frustration with the medical industry, the way that it's evolved, because the message that we get from the medical community is always, here's a pill, here's an injection, or here's a surgery. We can cut it out, we can jab it, or we can throw a chemical at it, and those aren't going to be the solution, especially for a mechanical problem. Surgery saves lives, those are necessary. There's wonderful things they can do with injections. Some medications are great, but it's too much of a quick fix approach, and if you actually want to heal and have longevity, it's got to come from the inside out. If it's not generated from the inside, it's not going to be a long-term fix.
I talk a lot about balance. I would say if I had to find one word that I stand by in terms of my personality and my promotion, I would say balance, and then I would say mind, body, and spirit balance, and then I would say you aren't balanced, you work on balance. So it's a daily activity to work on balance, and at the end of the day, if you did work on your balance or if you're out of sync.
Yeah.
So if someone's out of sync, is it much more easy for them to hurt themselves through a focus problem, a fatigue problem, those types of things, like a general contractor?
Yeah, oh, for sure. All of the above. And balance is so dynamic. And it's not the stand on one leg, how long can you hold it? Can you be there like a stork for 30 seconds? That doesn't really apply to the real world. In your example of, like, for instance, a contractor and being on a job site, lots of uneven surfaces, lots of heavy, awkward things that they have to pick up and move and manipulate. And balance is being able to handle all of those different environments and the task at hand, but the resources within the body, if something isn't there, a restriction, or they don't have that stability control, yes, it's going to lead to a problem. And especially if there's the mental focus lapse where they're focused on whatever the task at hand is, but the foot steps on something uneven, that doesn't have the balance and stability, that can lead to all sorts of problems or injuries, yes.
So your bachelor's degree in science is biopsychology.
Yeah.
So is that something that you still follow and you still study the psychology of the sports athlete, the sports medicine side of things?
Yes, and that was the undergrad degree that I came out with, and it was a stepping stone to get into PT school. But the further I get into my career, the more that I am gravitating towards the understanding of the psychology piece is huge. And so, but the biopsychology, it's all tied together, and how we interact with our environment and how we interact with ourselves, our self-talk, our self-identity also manifests physically and biologically in how the body moves and operates. So yeah, changing people's mindset to be able to get them to make changes for themselves is a huge piece of the puzzle, and communication becomes a bigger and bigger avenue to make those changes and help somebody get the mindset, attitude, and energy to do the changes they need to.
So you don't have a sitting job, so hallelujah for that, but you were a student for a long time, and probably for 26 years you were sedentary for a good portion of the day, and then you're studying at home, right, and you're preparing your reports. Now you've got some sitting time. So rugby fallout with injuries, can you compare that to sitting, and the sitting as the new smoking problem with the patients that you see? Like a damaged rugby player walks in, and then a person who sits all the time. Can you maybe comment on a few stories that come to mind?
Yeah. Well, you know, with sports, and rugby is the greatest sport, in my opinion, humbly. But yeah, so sports injuries are going to beat the body up. There's going to be some wear and tear, and those are the kinds of things that as we age, the body will come back and remind us about it. And it'll say, oh yeah, there was that knee that we tweaked way back when, and now it's a little cranky and it gets stirred up easily. And so that's the old injuries kind of coming back is more often what I see from the athletes that have beaten themselves up. Compared to somebody who has a profession where they're sitting a ton, what happens there is the body is always adapting to whatever we're feeding it. So if we're feeding it sitting in this kind of flexed position, shoulders rounded forward, head concentrating on the screen, the more time somebody spends there, the more the body is going to adapt to that, and it'll just say, okay, well, we can just turn the muscles off and we can tighten everything up, because that's all this person is asking me to do. So one of the big differences is that from the athletes that have beaten themselves up, we often see there's more of a specific injury that we can kind of tie it back to through the kinetic chain of the body. Sitting tends to be a more global hypomobility, just locks everything down, but it has so many different effects from the hips and the low back to the knees, and then up into the spine, the neck, the shoulders, headaches, all of that. So, and then of course we get the combination of the aging athlete who also ends up sitting a lot at this point in life, and that just kind of doubles the challenges to unravel.
So this story of the aging athlete, our mutual contact and associate and your rugby partner, Dr. Bill Gallivan, he turned me on to that idea back in 2009, and he gave me a world of work. But it turns out that I seem to be the person that's working on this more than anyone, and I'm looking for PhDs and postdocs to do it. I've done what I would call a very effective study that one person could do with 1,727 interviews, and you would be the 1,728. But I'd really like to have an organization do an official scientific study where we map it out. We've got a way to account for all this stuff in spreadsheets and what have you. What I found is that these athletes are becoming mostly sedentary. Less than 10% do regular physical activity when they leave the high-performance sport. And do you have any ideas why you think that might be?
You know, I guess my first thought would be that a shift in their identity. Because especially if you're an athlete at the elite levels, so much of your identity getting through life up to that point is about your sport, is about what you're doing, what your abilities and capabilities are to produce what you need to for your sport at hand. But once that stops, very often athletes go through kind of an identity crisis because that's what they've been able to latch onto for most of their lives, and now they're moving into a new phase where they can't say, well, I am an active rugby player, I still play competitive volleyball, or whatever the sport is, or martial arts. I don't really compete in the jiu-jitsu contests anymore. And so being able to shift their mindset to understand there's still a person with an identity in there, and you're not just a function of what you do, but you're much, much more than that. So for my personal story, I played team sports all my life, and all my adult life, from 18 years old up till 42, I was playing competitive rugby. And then when I stopped, I had to kind of, figure out, okay, now what do I do? But for me, there was an epiphany, kind of realizing in my body that I got to stop doing things to my body and start doing things for my body, because I want it to last, and I want to keep going and do stuff and use my body and be active. And so now my mindset is much more focused on, okay, what can I do to feed my body well, to keep it going, to improve my mobility, my coordination, my balance, agility, all those things. And it's one of those, if I only knew then what I know now, what could I have done with my athletic career? But I think it's really about a mindset shift, understanding where you are in life, accepting it, and looking forward to, okay, how am I going to make the best of where I'm at and keep getting better moving on?
So what happened when I was trying to make an initiative to go out and coach or teach coaches about this problem of they're not doing a breakout session before these folks retire. It's just like they're gone, they're used up, we don't need them anymore. And I thought they should have that all the way along. In high school, college, pros, wherever the program is, they teach these people what to do when I'm no longer there. I'm your coach, I'm your personal training person on the part of the team. What do you folks do when you leave our program? And it doesn't seem to be very prominent out there in the field. So somebody gave me the idea of go to the young people, go to the parents, the coaches of these 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, etc., and write a book specifically for them so you can teach these young people about recreation, balance, joy in movement, all these things that kind of get pushed away when you go to high performance and winning. Definitely. So do you think that's a valid enterprise, and how do you think, what do you think is a good way to reach the young people and the coaches in an open-minded way?
Yes, I think that sounds extremely valuable, and one of the things that's often not talked about enough, because part of what I see in not having kids, I'm kind of careful not to provide parenting advice. However, one of the things that I see in the world and the way things have evolved is that kids have lost free playtime, and that they're just in so many structured sports that I think having those kinds of messages from the coach, from the parents, from the top-down approach, feeding the kids and understanding that, hey, there's more to life than just the sport, so that they're having a little more balanced message as they get into those elite levels. But also I think the free playtime is huge, and for coaches and parents to understand that, okay, it's great to have soccer practice, baseball practice, basketball practice, football, dance, all of those things. But if you don't give the kids free playtime, they're not going to develop using their body in a variety of ways. And I mean, when I was growing up, and probably like yourself, I mean, it was the climbing trees and going through the creek and, climbing up hills and seeing what boulder you could get over and all of that kind of stuff, which teaches the body how to move better, more coordinated, and more adapted to the real world, versus sports are great. There's a ton of great life lessons, but it's so dictated and regimented that the kids lose that ability to be creative and imaginative and use their imaginations to make up games for themselves. So I think that's a missing piece that needs to be addressed, but also just the messaging, because so much of the coaching approach and the mindset there is they're just looking for the season, and once the athlete is done, they know a new wave of athletes are coming through, so they don't focus as much as on the athlete as much as they might on the team and then the season to season progression, whereas the parents really need to be on top of the kids, and if the message could come from the coaches, that would be even better too. So
you have a background, this is the last thing, and then we'll let you get back to your clinic. You have a background in food preparation, or organic, holistic, being a chef, being a lover of food. Mm-hmm. What would you say is the recipe for a well and balanced life?
Well and balanced life. Well, playing into it with the food, whole fresh foods, going to the farmer's market and, not the box, the can, the bagged stuff. All of the processed food is going to be pretty horrible for you. So the balance there, I am a believer in eating meat, and I think a lot of vegetables and having some meat is really good in terms of balance. But then it's, for the rest of life, it's always the journey that everybody is on as an individual is trying to find their own balance, and having to carve out the time for the self-care is the big piece that gets lost with our society that's go, 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 and the more devices we have, the more the schedules get filled, we lose that self-care time. But that's where I think the biggest piece of balance comes in, is taking those moments to do a little bit of your own exercise, a little bit of your own mental stuff, whether that's meditation or just other practices, reading, journaling, whatever. But I think the biggest piece is carving out that self-care time. That's huge.
Wonderful. And Dr. Steve, can you share with us your website and how people can find you on the internet?
Yeah, my website is kinesi.com. That's KINECI.com. And that's a great place to find me. I am on YouTube and got some videos there that are growing. I'm also on Facebook, and it's Kinesi Health in Motion. And there we do, every week we do a live Facebook I call it Redefining Movement. We pick a topic and then we spend about half an hour exploring that topic through a variety of progressive integrated movements.
Fantastic. So I'll step in here with Dr. Steve. So we had a good time today. We hope you learned something. So please please subscribe, and check out Dr. Steve's website. And if you're in the Santa Barbara area, if you want to do something on Zoom, Dr. Steve's available to help you to get to where you need to go. Aloha. Cheers.